At last, we have come to the time of the year where I begin to think spring may actually happen. Two things offer hope in these weeks of the calendar: the Feast of St. Brigid and seed catalogs. St. Brigid, like so many Catholic saints, was co-opted from ancient pagan characters to make the colonizers' new religion seem at least a little bit familiar and palatable. Brigid's celebration is on February 1st, which seems to be a truly premature celebration of spring, but it is about 6 weeks after the winter solstice and at a time when the days are growing convincingly longer each week. It is also likely the time when pregnancies conceived during the fall's harvest celebrations made themselves apparent. It is a time of promise and renewal and rebirth, time to plan for spring, for planting, for fresh air and warm sunshine. Here in Pennsylvania, of course, it is the time of the year designated to roust a pudgy sleeping rodent from his burrow and ask him in a flash of cameras and video lights to predict the weather for the next couple months. I think it is a gift of nature that we are not able to understand the language of groundhogs. For surely Phil must have some choice words for humans later this week. In Maine, my younger sister is making haggis for reasons I do not understand. Something about Robert Burns, she tells me. I was raised by the Irish side of the family. She was raised by the Scots. We Irish may boil our food, but at least it's food. As we move forward into 2023, keeping in mind our discussion a couple of weeks ago about making bite-sized progress towards larger goals. Remember the trim tabs and our triangles? There are so many issues in the world that need our attention. Our joys and sorrows highlighted them this morning. Gun violence, systemic racism, the environment. How do we, as a congregation, figure out which of these ideas to focus our collective energy toward? Now, I noticed after some of the triangles went up that there are a lot of triangles that name climate change and the environment as a primary issue that needs to be addressed. Now, all of the issues written there are valid, and heaven knows we all dedicate some portion of our time and energy to addressing them, even in trim tab sized bites. But it seems that environment is a concern that is shared by a lot of people. Our geographic location brings climate issues and pollution to the forefront every day. Many of us live in or near flood zones, yes? Right? I found after the purchase of my house that I'm in an X, flood X zone. It's very exciting. I am anticipating that I may stock my basement with trout this spring. The town of Sunbury is almost entirely a flood zone, as is Northumberland, downtown anyway, and Sealands Grove. The North Branch of the Susquehanna River was named Pennsylvania's River of 2023 by the Pennsylvania Organization of Watersheds and Rivers, POWR. And according to that happened just this past week. According to the POWR website, this honor, quote, is designed to elevate public awareness of specific rivers and recognize important conservation needs and achievements. And this is the 40th year that that designation has been awarded. That river, just a few hundred yards from our building, is a vital natural resource. It brings water flowing from the Poconos down through the Susquehanna Valley, feeding into the Chesapeake Bay with its oyster aquaculture program and crab fisheries. Now, as many of you know, there is a project slated to be built almost across the road from us, almost directly between us and the river itself, to do a sort of recycling process for plastics. Now, it's not the kind of recycling place we generally think of when we hear those words. This place will not be chopping up Mountain Dew bottles and butter tubs to make park benches. Instead, it will be extracting liquid compounds from the plastics through a high pressure, high temperature chemical process, and then loading those chemicals on rail cars and trucks for transit to plastic factories around the country, excuse me. I spent what feels like a perverse number of hours in the last month trying to learn all I can about this fancy technology and chemistry. And honestly, it is beyond my comprehension. There are too many words that end in "ine," and too many chemical symbols that were just beyond my understanding. So I did the next most reasonable thing, which is I looked to what chemists were saying about it. That helped, although it did make me more than a little concerned. Now, next week after service, there's going to be a person named Sally Field who will be here to talk about the proposed Encina plant. Encina? Sandy Field. Sandy? Sandy, okay. Sorry, I had an actress on my mind. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought, Sandy Field will be here to talk about the proposed project after worship next week. And I expect many of you will want to hear what she has to say. A large number of people are concerned about the idea of putting what amounts to a chemical refinery on the banks of such a vital and vulnerable natural resource as the North Branch of the Susquehanna River. That project may be a bit beyond what some of us feel qualified to address, but there are other trim tab size things we can do to affect change in our environment and on our planet. The UUA has a program called the Green Sanctuary Project. You've heard of that, right? And what that is it's a program where congregations can take steps to reduce their carbon footprint by doing pretty basic things like eliminating, paper plates and styrofoam cups and disposable forks and things like that. Putting solar panels on the roof. You could put in, a charging station for electric cars. We can plant flowers that attract pollinators and butterflies. There are a lot of things that we can do toward that goal. Last week, after the service about the trim tabs, Sarah and I were interviewed by Reverend Ashley Horan, who is with the 30 Days of Love project with the UUA. And we told her about our geodesic sphere thing here. And she told us that this Green Sanctuary project is rolling out a new set of guidelines in the coming weeks, and was excited to think that we might consider being one of the first congregations to engage in that project. So now I have to say, I love this pulpit. I did the thing that middle-aged ministers do, middle-aged anybody does these days, is I posted a picture of it online, right, on Facebook. Look what I got. And I am now the envy of a number of colleagues. This is just a thing of beauty. Hutch did such a marvelous job depicting the motion of the river in these straight wooden slats. I think I spent an hour just looking at this thing on Friday, walking around it, touching it, admiring the craftsmanship and creativity, depicting lines and water with straight pieces of wood is a gift. It's a thing of beauty. And it, like the brass sculpture by Dick Bonham behind me, evokes the water that surrounds and nurtures our communities. Now, of course, the congregation will make up its own mind about what it would like to do sort of as a group, where it would like to focus its energy. But it kind of feels like you're already doing that without being consciously aware of it. I mean, this place, your name, our name, is the congregation of the Susquehanna Valley. This place is of the river. The towns up and down the valley understand the river as a part of the community. It is a player in the way things get done. Even in this room, I bet everyone knows which direction the river is from. Which direction the river is from where they are, no matter where you are. Right? I know that the river is that way, right? That's not hard. But when I'm in my home, I look out my kitchen window and I can see Penns Creek flowing between my house and the Isle of Kew on its way to join the Susquehanna a half mile down. People here know where the river is in the same way people who live on the coast always know where the ocean is. Or how people who live in Colorado know where the range is. It is a touchstone. It is a thing that centers us. It is a natural familiar. Saint Brigid was the patron saint of a lot of things, including poets and bards and fire and smithcraft and healing wells and birth and death and, not unsurprisingly, lesbians. The Catholic Church is not so happy about that, but her pagan goddess myths and legends tangle with the saintly narrative of the Catholic colonizers, but that makes her accessible to a lot of people. Multiple wells and springs and small rivers in Ireland bear her name, as do parishes and churches. St. Brigid has a lot to offer. And so here we sit, almost on her celebration day, midway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Warmer weather is undeniably approaching. It does every year, you know, but some years we wonder. I remember I was at a recovery meeting in a church basement some years ago in Bar Harbor. And it was one of those years where it just seemed to snow every couple of days. 6 inches, 8 inches, 5 inches, 18 inches. And it just didn't stop. It started at Christmas and it kept going. And in March, we still couldn't move around. And I remember somebody saying, "Good God, will spring ever come?" And I remember this old salt, very droll Maynard, always has. So spring will come, always has. But we are in a time where we consider what needs our attention this year. How will we plant? How will we plant our gardens? How will we plant our energy? To what will we direct our attention and resources? St. Brigid has a lot to offer us in the way of ideas. Certainly more than poor Punxsutawney Phil. I pray that we may be thoughtful and intentional as we consider our power. We consider our privilege. How will we use it? Where will we point it? How shall we focus our collective energy in a way that lives out our values? Let the work of justice forever be our practice and our prayer, this day and always. Amen. I invite you now to rise